Howdy, folks. Welcome to another day in the Milky Way. And here we go for another night. We got Young Wild West, Prince of the Saddle. And this will be part 4, I think it is. I hope you're all doing good. Thank you for coming. I sure do enjoy doing these for you. It's been a pretty good story. Last we knew, Young Wild West had saved the girl, jumped the canyon, and he had met up with his friends and was headed back to town where they were all celebrating. So tonight we're going to get back to chapter 7, and we're going to find out what happened after that. And so come along with me and let's go back to yesteryear where things were good and wild and crazy. And as always, we're going to play a little bit of this music that is, always a part. If I can turn it down. I'm running the bus, boys and girls. I'm running the bus. And we're going to share this. There we go. That should be sharing. And we're going to go like this. Yay! Now, we just had a picture for that. So, anyway. And there we go. But anyway, that kind of gives you the theme. Young Wild West coming up. And he is going to be... That is the conclusion of that. Yay, to get our day started. So, anyway, where are we going to go with this? We're going to go to Young Wild West, Chapter 7. Well, thanks for all coming. I know your time is important and valuable. And you beautiful people, thank you. Thank you for coming. Let's see. Let's get right into it. And as I share my screen... And I get there, share, and here we go. And I'll enlarge it so y'all can see that. Look at that. I really almost know what I'm doing, believe it or not. And we'll make that and get my ugly mug out of the picture. And start on Chapter 7. Young Wild West makes a bet. The great ovation was given to Young Wild West by the honest-hearted settlers of the Forks. He had accomplished more by his grit and daring than any other of them had dreamed a man was capable of. But the boy insisted that his horse and all three who had followed him and cut him free from his bonds in the Indian camp deserved the credit, and not he. I only did what anyone else would have done if they had the chance, he said. I will admit that I did not let a single chance slip through the entire excitement, though. I started out to rescue Arita Murdoch from the Sioux, and by the help of my friends and my horse, I rescued her. That is all there is to it. I don't want you to lionize me. I don't like flattery, so please let it go at that. A cheer followed this little speech. Arita stepped forward and touched Wild on the arm. It just occurred to me, she whispered, that I'd never thank you for saving me from the Indians. I want to do so now. Believe me when I say I will never forget you. Never. Young Wild West blushed like a schoolboy. I am glad to hear you say that, he managed to find words to answer. I like you very much, Miss Murdoch. Well, don't call me Miss, then. Call me Arita. And I will, if will call me Wild. Very well, then. Wild. Now, if you will accept it, I will shall make you a charm, such as an old squaw told me about once. I suppose to be a thing that will save the life of a person in times of great danger. Will you wear it if I make it one for you? Will I wear it? Certainly, Arita. I will be only be too pleased to wear anything that was made by your hands. I am not superstitious, though, so remember that I will wear the charm just because you are going to make it from your hands, and for no other reason. Very well. That is quite satisfactory to me. I will have it done by tomorrow. It was in the evening, after the remarkable events of the morning, that this conversation took place, and the moment the girl came up to young Wild West, though those who had been standing around withdrew. Cheyenne Charlie and Jack Ruby had gone back to Fort Bridger, but Jim Dart was around. He seemed to be greatly pleased with the headway Wild was making in what he was pleased to call his little love match. I can see how it will turn out someday, he said half an hour later. And as you two boys got together, you're all luckiest fellow in the West. I have such a fine girl as to that fall in love with you. You will do me a great kindness if you don't say anything more about it, replied Wild. All right, old feller. I won't then. If you see fighting Indians, one would never think you was a bashful. Let it drop, will ya? Jim saw that it was in earnest, so he promptly changed the subject. Though it was not likely that Gray Elk would bother the settlers that night, a good watch was kept. The next morning, Cheyenne Charlie rode over the fort with a message from the commandant. It was in effect that the entire Sioux tribe were showing a very warlike attitude and advised the settlers to abandon their homes and come to Fort Bridger to live until the trouble was over. Old Gray Elk and two prominent chiefs of the Sioux Nation were the leaders in the movement, and the lack of the soldiers in the section made it rather unpleasant for the whites to think about. After a talk on the subject, the settlers concluded to quit the Forks. They had the biggest part of their crops planted, and that meant a heavy loss to them. But they had located too far away from the fort to be under its protection to any great extent, and there was no other course to pursue just now. While observed old Sam Murdoch, if I leave their Forks today, I leave for good. I strike out gold hunting, 'cause farming ain't a little too slow for me anyhow. Why, where would you go to, Grandpop? Asked pretty Anrita, who heard the old man's remarks. There are plenty of places in the mountains where they are striking it rich, was the reply. If we can settle in some little mining town, you'll be 100% safer than you are here on a farm. But there are very few who ever made a success at gold hunting. Not now. Men are striking it rich every day. I heard from an old partner of mine that the other day he's getting rich up in them there hills, and otherwise me to come there. Well, I shouldn't object. You know best. Yes, I ain't got a while longer to live, and I want to leave something for you when I peg out. I've never made anything at farming. It's now being decided that they were to leave the settlers and got right at it. They hitched up their teams and placed their household effects in the wagons, many of them regretfully, as they had learned to love the place. It did not take them a great while to get ready, and shortly before noon the wagon train started, with the cattle being driven ahead for the fort. Arita owned a pretty black pony, which had been given her by her grandfather a few months before. She was quite at home in the saddle, and she rode alongside young Wild West. Near the head of the line, the settlers' wives looked at each other and nodded significantly. But there was no one in the entire party who would not admit that they thought them a very handsome and dashing looking couple. The sorrel horse and the black pony cut fine figures, and their riders did the same. The journey to Fort Bridger was made in due time, and the people at once began to form temporary headquarters as there were not enough buildings in the place to accommodate them. The majority of the women and children were given temporary quarters in the cabins of the residents, but the men were forced to go into camp. The next day, the work was of cutting down trees and forming them into logs would begin, and then the building of cabins would follow. According to all reports, it looked as though they would not be able to return to the forks in some time. And if the Indians once got on the warpath for fair, it was quite likely that it would be months before they would be quelled and peace once more restored. The horsemanship of daring deeds of young Wild West soon got noised about among the entire populace, and he received the admiring gaze of nearly everyone in the little village. We say nearly everyone, for there were a few who did not like to, or seemed to like him very much. There were probably a half a dozen men who belonged to the lower order of common mortals, and they were the ones. Nearly every man had something against his character, but as they had behaved themselves fairly well of lately, they had been allowed all the rights and privileges of the village. Probably the one who took the most dislike to Wild was a big, ungainly, but powerful fellow who was known as Buckwood. He had not been around the day the men were trying to break the wild horse, and he had been sneering about what took place on that day ever since. Such people were bound to find someone to listen to them and also agree with them. And while young Wild West was busy helping the men fix up their temporary headquarters, Buckwood was telling three of his comrades what he thought of the boy. He's nothing more than a young upstart who has more luck than brains when he tackled that horse, he said. And as for him grabbing that there gal from old Gray Elk camp and riding off, jumping over a hole in the ground, any one of us could have done that. If he ain't goes to putting on any airs around me, I'll apt to teach him that he's only a boy and has no business with the men. Right you are, Buck, exclaimed his listeners in unison. One of his cronies was named Andrews. He sold whiskey to the soldiers and bordermen on the sly. He agreed that everything Buck was said and produced some liquor to show what a good friend he was to him. I'd like to show that young tenderfoot something about riding, observed the big ugly bulk as he qualified the whiskey and that that he had handed him. I never seed their man that could beaten me handling a horse yet. Bill Cody, nor Bill Hickok, nor anyone else could do that. I did when I had a trail one day down on their banks of the Platte in Nebraska, and I guess this boy can't do that. I should say not, of course, the listeners. I just happened that Jim Dart was passing. Just then, the men were in the shanty owned by Andrews and thought the door was closed. He could hear every word was said. He stayed long enough to hear the whole lot more, all which was complimentary to his young friend. Jim Dart did what any good friend would do. He went to Wild and calling him aside said, "There are some people around here who are down on you." "Is that so?" asked the boy in surprise. "I am sure I have not done anything to injure anyone. What appears to be trouble anyway." "Oh, they are just jealous of attention you are attracted for what you have done. I don't think the parties amount to a great deal, though. Well, perhaps they don't. But I'll like to know who they are, though. Well, I'll point them out to you first chance I get." The chance did not come until the following morning. And then Jim showed young Wild West the men as they were just about to enter Buckwood's shanty. Wild at once called to them, and they turned to see what he wanted. "I'd like to ask you people if I have ever done anything to you," he said. "I reckon not," resorted Buck, who took it on himself to act as spokesman. "Then Then what are you down on me for? Haven't I just as much right to live around here as you, as long as I mind my own business and let other people alone? See here, young feller, spoke up Andrews. You had better keep your tongue still, or you might get her into trouble. That's all right, answered Wild. If you people have got anything against me, I want you to spit it out, like men would do. Do you understand what I'm driving at now? They tell me that you are a champion horseman of these parts, ventured Buckwood, who did not appear to get angry at the boy's remarks. I don't say so. Well, maybe you think you are. Well, I won't brag, but I think I could give you a few lessons at riding, either fancy or plain. You do that, hey? I guess you don't know who you're talking to. No, I don't exactly know, but I'll ask Cheyenne Charlie. Perhaps he can tell me something about you. It was a hot jab at the bully, though Wild West did not know it. Cheyenne Charlie had given Buck a sound lashing about a month before, and the two had spoken since, or hadn't spoken since. Oh, you needn't ask him about me. Him and I ain't good friends. Ask any of the gentlemen here. Well, we'll drop the asking part and allow that you are the first-class horseman. I made the assertion that I could give you lessons, and I am willing to put up money that I can. How much money have you got? I got $100, which I have been saving for the last 3 months. You want to cover it on that proposition I made? Yes. Put up your money in the hands of Andrews here. Oh, no. I don't know, Andrews. Well, go over to the supply store and put the money up in the hands of the man who runs it. Are you satisfied with that? The man thought a while and then said he guessed he was. Well, come on then. There's no use waiting. If you can beat me at handling or riding a horse, why, you are welcome to come to get my money, though I was a good willing earning it. The boy's straightforward and unflinching manner had brought Buck down a peg or two. He was a bit coward at the most, but he did not want to back from any making a bet now. Besides, he really did have a big opinion of himself as far as his horsemanship was concerned. The whole crowd walked up to the supply store, seeing young Wild West and Jim with men who bore a shady reputation. Cheyenne Charlie and some of his friends followed. The man who kept the store was named Smith, and he promptly came out with Jim Dart, told him what he wanted of him. You see, it is just this way, young Wild West explained. This man here, indicating Buck Wood, has said that he can beat me handling a horse, and I've offered to bet him $100 that he can't. I will put the money up in your hands, and if he covers it, I am willing to compete with him as soon as he wants to. Oh, I'll hold the money all right, said Smith, and he promptly took the roll Wild handed him and carefully counted it. There's just 100 here. Come down, Buck, if you ain't trying to bluff the young fellow. Oh, I ain't trying to bluff him, was the quick retort. I ain't got quite $100, but Andrews will help me out, I guess. That I will, spoke up his chum, and the money was soon counted and placed in Smith's hands, along with Wild's. By this time, at least 20 men had gathered in front of the store, and when they heard what the bet was, they felt sorry for Buck. While he was an excellent rider and had the tricks of the cowboys, greasers, and Indians down pretty fine, they knew that he was no match for young Wild West. What the boy had done with the wild stallion was enough to make them think that way. I'll go and get my horse, remarked Buck, turning away. I'm ready now. So am I, nodded Wild. I'll be ready as soon as you are. As the big bully left the crowd, Cheyenne Charlie heard his remarks to Andrews. If that boy does win the money, I'll give him their worst beating he'd ever had, see if I don't. You will, hey? Muttered Charlie as he turned his head so as not to let it be known that he heard the remark. I don't believe you could give that boy a beating as big as you are if you had a square show. Anyhow, your kin. Well, I'll see if you don't. Okay, that was chapter 7. Chapter 8, Wild defeats Buck Wood. We're going to leave it at that. So you got to tune in next time for, let me stop the share here. There we go. And we are going to drop that and play this. Yay. Share. And there we go. And now we can do this. There we go. Back to playing music. Yeah. I do so enjoy playing with this stuff. It's kind of fun, you know? Anyway, that was our Western show, Young Wild West, and Prince in the Saddle, as he tries to bet with Buck Wild. And so tomorrow we'll find out what happens on our next episode of Young Wild West. So tune in then. And we will find out what will be. And Young Wild West will come through and be the hero of the day. Will he buck out the horse? Will Wood win the bet? Well, let's find out. Anyway, take care, everybody. Thank you for your precious time and tuning in, and for another chapter of Young Wild West. And tune in weekdays at 9 o'clock, Central Time. And if you have any questions or comments, send me an email. If you'd like to hear something, send me an email. It's always good. Okay, well, let be at that. Remember, everybody, be the frequency you want to receive. Love you all. Peace, everyone.